Preparing.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I don't know what happened.
Hi.
All right. Dun, 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 dun. All right, I feel like we should have had this like a little bit of elevator music. But since I am fresh off the Maxwell concert and he did not play my wife's favorite song last night, and a lot of people in the community are upset at that, Maxwell. So this
Get it.
this woman's worth all the money. All right. So if you guys are just joining us, this is Eric Saunders, the Green Eye Bandit. I'm your co-host, but I am here with the wonderful Hall of Famer, Ms. Tamika Catchings. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm
And
feeling.
honestly, I am like Eric. Eric is the host. I am his co-host. So let's be clear about this. So if we get through and get going, y'all, you know, he might have to mute a couple times where I have to step in. You got the kids in the background. They start going crazy. They all, for those that have kids, the kids always know when to chime in at the right time. So, hey, you know, it just makes for a great festive opportunity.
And you know what? It's interesting that you say that because my daughter just got her hair done, and she got one like little heart braided right there where I'm starting to bald a little bit, and she got her edges done, and I was just like, man, whatever happened to 1998 where it just had to be rough around here or just slick back or slightly
How I look right now.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know we have some viewers coming in, and we're excited to have you. Major announcement. This is our 24th episode.
Yay.
24th episode. So what's that? That's 2 years. So this is our 2-year anniversary, essentially marking the time when we initially started this during the COVID pandemic, and just giving us an opportunity to connect with one another. And we haven't stopped connecting with one another. So again, this is our 24th episode. And as you know, a certain magical person wears that number, has retired that number. And so I just wanted to highlight that. Tamika Catchings at Tease Me. Go over to Tease Me on 21st and Talbot Street, where you can go ahead and get tea, but not for free. Now, I also wanted to make sure that everyone acknowledges that today is my last day as a 38-year-old man. On 12 midnight, I will become 39 and that much closer to 40 and AARP coupons. So,
Wait a minute now.
Oh.
Not when the coupons start kicking
Listen,
in at 40. No.
like I said, I need one at 38. I got a Charlie horse and a sciatic nerve issue, but we're going to get through it today. Guys, we're talking about ending racism through education tonight. And tonight we are honored to have some community leaders here with us. Not some folks we just say, hey, man, what you doing Friday? On 38th and Meridian somewhere on the circle. These are school leaders. These are artists. These are people who have paid their dues and are seeing the ins and outs of education that a lot of folks, a lot of parents typically do not see. A lot of professionals do not see. And so we're just blessed to have some community members who are on the front line of education. And I say front line because and I'm an educator myself, and COVID changed our culture. But prior to COVID changing our culture, social media has changed our culture. A lot of things have changed our culture. But one of the things that has repeatedly been in our culture is racism. So racism, on top of those other things that I mentioned, these are a lot of things to adjust to. So tonight, we're definitely going to have opportunity to hear from, again, some community leaders who are dealing with this head on. And if you're just joining it, share with your friends. We know we got some folks out here that come and go off on that Facebook chat. And so we want your energy tonight. We have a some surprise artwork for you tonight. And so we've been slacking on it, but we back with it. And so I can't wait to highlight that work that we have for you. Tamika, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we just get going?
No, I'm ready to jump in. I'm ready to introduce our panelists. We'll allow them to introduce themselves. And then let's jump into the conversation. I always feel like when we start the conversation, we say, oh my gosh, we got an hour and a half to talk and we don't have, like, what are we going to fill an hour and a half time-wise? And then we get into it, and I feel like by the time we roll around to almost the end, we literally are wishing that we had more time. So I need to stop talking, but definitely want to make sure we get an opportunity to let our panelists introduce themselves, and then let's jump into the conversation.
All right, before we let the panels introduce themselves, like I said, we're talking about racism tonight. People be getting heated. So we want to make sure that we go ahead and go. So we're just going to go around the horn and just I'll start with Miss Graves. Would you like to start? Introduce yourself.
My name is Charlotte Graves. I live in Anderson, Indiana, but I am the social and emotional learning specialist for Perry Township Schools in Indianapolis.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Ms. Holiday.
Hello. Everyone calls me Mijisa, which means one who works with her hands. My given name, Sandra Jo Holiday. I'm an artist, an actress, a poet, and I used to teach dance. Eric shared a very sweet memory. And I'm from Indianapolis, and I'm still doing everything but dance. And I am so honored to be here.
I'm definitely honored to have you. Yeah, we just keep crossing paths through dance, spoken word, Cafe Kumba, and here we are tonight. So next we have Miss Webb. Miss Webb, would you like to introduce yourself?
As you can see, I've had several difficulties. My name is Teresha Webb. I'm from Anderson. I've been a principal here for a couple of years now. It was a tough road getting my job because of what we're talking about tonight. Charlotte's from Anderson, and I've had a couple of her family members, so she knows Anderson has a pretty bad history with hiring us. I don't know why, so I'm glad to be a part of the conversation and whatever I can contribute. And by the way, 38 is not old. My daughter happens to be 37.
Okay, listen. 38 is old. I'm just,
You won't get no discounts.
Nope.
All right. Last on our panel, we have my good friend and actual manager. But no, we go way back since we were kids, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about who he is and what he's been able to represent.
Hey, Ms. Webb, I know exactly why. What we're talking about tonight is why Anderson has a problem hiring folks that look like us. But I am just a kid from the east side of Indy. My name is Robert Marshall. I have the pleasure of working alongside Eric at Vanguard Collegiate of Indianapolis, where I serve as the founder and executive director. Such an honor and a privilege to be here this evening.
Awesome. Did I leave anybody out? All right, then we're moving right along. Tamika, I want you to actually throw out that first question for me today. And kind of you feeling.
Okay, well, it's interesting because, one of the things we always like to do is we like to kind of preface everything and have questions available just to get the conversation going. But as I started thinking about the first question and started thinking about, I changed it up a little bit. I kind of already know the answer. You know how people ask you questions that they already know the answer. They just want you to, they give you the stage to be able to state your own truth. So I just switched up the question a little bit, and I'm going to read it because I wrote it down. From your perspective, do you think, and this is a yes or no, from your perspective, do you think, yes or no, what is your opinion on how racism affects education? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I think that's a great way to contextualize what we're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So do
It's-
you think that it's present?
Right.
Does it
In your
matter?
opinion, it doesn't matter. It's the open conversation.
I think yes. And one of the reasons why is because there is no representation for our students, and our students see themselves as others. They don't see themselves as a part of the process, especially as a part of the classroom. The overall environment of our buildings do not represent all of our kids.
I agree. Yes, racism does exist. And I think it affects our children, all children, because it ill equips them with dealing with the future. They're ill prepared to make the necessary changes in our society because, one, it's not recognized, it's not discussed, it's not talked about, but everyone feels its effect.
Okay, Ms. Graves, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, so in my school, I am the only person of color in a staff role at all, whether it's a teacher and actually the custodian, everybody. There's not the lunch people, no one in the building that is a staff member is of color. So of course, when the students saw me come in, they were very surprised. And although I'm in a support role, I'm not teaching. I'm so glad that they are seeing me, because a lot of the students that I have to see, that I interact with, that I'm providing social and emotional services to, are of color. Not all of them, but the majority of my students in the school are not of color. And if they are, they're Burmese. So yes, I think it definitely affects education.
The experiences that you all have shared about the lack of representation in your schools is one of the primary reasons why I even created a school, because I wanted a space where Black, brown, and poor kids felt like they could see themselves, they could be comfortable and be themselves in space and receive a high quality education. To directly answer your question, absolutely yes, racism impacts education on a multitude of levels. I think one space that I would directly point to, and let me preface this statement with a couple of things. One, 80% of the education workforce in the country is white women. Let me explain why I believe that is problematic. And the statement that I'm sure will kind of take people back is that racism is so pervasive in education in part because we need to dismantle this white women culture that exists within education. It is my personal belief that there are no two people in American culture that have such a diametrically opposed experience as a white woman and a Black boy. And we can go throughout history from Emmett Till all the way to Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, right? And find examples of Black boys and white women that have these diametrically opposed experiences in America. And then you put them in a space that has responsibility for some of the most foundational and impactful years of a kid's life that determines their trajectory and success. And if there's not this, if that individual has the inability to leave behind and shed their white privilege, to not only learn about but embrace that culture, to leave behind and shed their own biases, those carry over into the classroom and they impact academic success, they impact social emotional success, and they impact, and stunt growth for Black kids. And so, yes, racism absolutely exists in education.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to Eric. I know you're about to jump in, but I like the I like what everybody said, but like going back and thinking, ill prepared to make necessary changes for life. Do you guys agree or disagree? Y'all are on mute.
I agree again because the ill preparedness comes from not being able to deal with anything. Charlotte deals with the social emotional aspect of the kids, and she sees it. I mean, they go from 1 to 100, and there's no in between because they haven't been taught to deal with anything. Like you said, ill prepared. You're ill prepared for being late, walking in a classroom, and the teacher saying, "Why are you late? Because your mama don't have a job." Blah blah blah. They are ill prepared to deal with that. They just snap off. There's nothing in between. And the life skills that we are missing were taught by people that we know or people that look like us. We don't have anybody to teach you any of those things. How to say thank you, no thank you, simple things like that. I mean, my kids growing up, they used to say yes ma'am, no ma'am. Even if it was crazy, my husband taught them that. I didn't, and because I didn't do it. So coming from him, he taught them that kind of stuff, and just being able to answer a person other than saying, yeah, nope. I mean, those are simple things that our kids are not taught. And as soon as they do it in the presence of the other people, they say, they're disrespectful, they're this, but that's not what they're taught. They don't know how to deal with any conflict, any change whatsoever drives our kids absolutely crazy. And there's nobody there to deal with it.
That's,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you're going to speak to that question. Can you repeat that question for us, for our viewers one more time?
I just went off a statement that Sandra had put out. She said, our kids are ill prepared to make the necessary changes in life. And then my question really was, do you agree with that or not? But that was off of a statement that was already presented.
Gotcha. And Sandra, you were going to say?
About the manners and the little basic things, I'd like to add to that some of the basic things that our children should be learning at home. It's about who they are, their history before slavery. We want children to sit 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, witnessing and experiencing subtle racism, some of them not having the verbal capacity to come home and tell their parents what's going on, but still be affected. And then they grow up and they get into adolescence and combine that with hormones, and you got crazy. That's a lot to deal with, not having the avenue to deal with it. And of course, we have people like the young lady that helps these students walk through it. But yeah, manners, knowing your history, knowing a little bit about your culture, having to walk into a white situation and not even understand why you're brown and being discriminated for it can be emotionally traumatic. Some children don't even know what melanin is and what it does for us, or why our hair grows the way it does, or why our features are the way they are. Just knowing that can help, confront, the name calling, the put downs, being ostracized, discriminated, things like that.
and speaking to that, one of the things that I do in my role is I decided that I was going to have like a circle of sisters group and a band of brothers group. And a lot of them the students were identified by their teachers, but they're of all ethnicities. Again, we don't have a lot of people, children of color, Black children at the school. But because they have not had much experience with people of color, they ask me questions. And I tell them there is nothing, as long as you're respectful, there is nothing off the table. If it is on your mind, these are K through 5. So if it is on your mind, ask me. And I feel like I'm fostering that conversation because they're not going to get it any other place. So not even fostering it about me being a woman of color, a Black woman, but there's so many children now in the school that are that have migrated and they're Burmese. So they speak a different language. Their hair looks different. Their skin color is different. it's majority in their classroom. So they're now having to identify, and again, they're asking questions. So I feel like that conversation is at least being started in a safe space. That's the other thing, is that it's a safe space. So if you're respectful, ask me, and we'll start that conversation, because I would rather them ask than assume.
I
Yep.
agree. Oh,
Go ahead.
please. I was gonna
No.
say I agree that a lot of our kids are ill prepared. Education as a system is still fighting some of the same issues that we were fighting 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so if you haven't broken that cycle, then you're just creating and perpetuating the situation. One of the things that Eric and I often have conversations about is this concept of school hurt, right? Well, you know, we've heard of church hurt. Folks have traumatic experiences with school, similar to what Ms. Holliday talked about, right? And so that sometimes can prevent them from having a positive perspective on education, and it impacts their approach to their own child's education. And so you get a situation where, you know, on one end, some things that we see, like a parent is really defensive. And so while we're an all-Black school with, you know, 100% minority staff, and we're here specifically for those families, they're defensive because they've had such terrible and traumatic experiences in other schools. And so that's what school has to be. And we're trying to create this situation where that's not what school is. Or, you know, because of those microaggressions and the racism and some of the systems that these parents have just been beaten down by, education isn't necessarily the priority for them. And so it's not the priority for their kids. And so consequently, you have kids that come in that are absolutely ill prepared. And then the last thing I'll say is just kind of to what Eric kind of mentioned a little earlier. COVID impacted our culture in a lot of ways. And I think two that are really big is, one, it put a microscope on some of those issues that were already existing in education, that we just kind of turned a blind eye to. So for instance, a situation with equity, you know, every school was a one-to-one with technology, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and now we got money to give everybody a laptop. Where did that money come from, and why wasn't it already there? Why wasn't this already a priority, right? And then the second thing that I think, in terms of the way it impacted our culture, man, going virtual changed the game and the way school happens. But I think more than that, we got an opportunity to really peek into the lives of our kids, see some of the things that they are seriously dealing with. And families were trying to survive, right? And I think we had, once the coast was clear and it was safe enough to, you know, be back in public and wear masks, that people could come out of survival mode. And this thing is going to impact us and keep us in survival mode for some years to come. And I don't know if we being education, has made sustainable changes to combat that.
I agree.
Meaning what? Like, for somebody like y'all are in the educational world, but for some of us that aren't necessarily in the educational world, what do you mean by that statement? Like, we're not prepared?
So I'll look at it I'll tackle that question two different ways. So one, as a school administrator, right? There was a flood of dollars that came into schools. You know, you had the CARES Act and ESSER funds that came through the feds to the state and funneled down to schools. You got a system like Pike that got like $36 million in federal aid around that. Smaller schools like ours, they receive a few $100s, right? And here's what's interesting about it. The funds expire in a couple of years. And one interesting caveat was that you could create new positions, but you couldn't use the funds to sustain existing positions, right? And so when that money goes away, what happens to those jobs? And so what's really, and so why I bring that up is to my second point was SEL right? So social emotional learning was a huge focus on that. Diversity and inclusion was a huge focus in on that. And so fiscally, you set those things up to become a trend. Trends come and go. And so what's the sustainability plan for the system as a whole? Individual schools may have those sustainability plans and figure this thing out, what that's going to look like. But as a whole, what's that going to look like? And so, you know, when you have a system, and I'm not trying to pick on IPS, but you have a system like IPS, you know, you've created all these different jobs, but the last 10 years, your enrollment's been declining. Your money is tied directly to your enrollment. And so if your money is declining as your enrollment's declining, then fiscally, how are you going to sustain all those new positions? So now SEL and diversity and inclusion can't be a priority because you have to focus on the fundamentals again.
So I'll speak to that because my position was created. The SEL position that I have is created because of COVID. And my supervisor makes that very clear that our positions are grant funded. So what the goal is, and not to, she says that in the spirit of knowing that what we're doing in that school is going to be, you know, limited, the time that we have. So we're in a year, we're going on the second year. And right now what we're talking about is that sustainability piece. So when I'm out of the building, what are you guys going to do to make sure that the steps, the skills, the strategies, all these things that we're doing to work to help these kids to get even through their day sometimes. What are you going to do when I'm not here? Because you can't let me just focus on the behavior stuff because that's not what my primary role is supposed to be. So what are you going to do then to not only get somebody that's going to take over the behavior piece, but also that social emotional piece as well? So that is exactly what my supervisor is very cognizant of, is what's going to happen when we're not there. So that's the piece that the end of this school year and then next school year, that's what we'll be focusing on, is sustainability.
But
it's up to the school.
Charlie, you don't have to answer this question, but I think your comment immediately raises the question, where's the accountability going to be once you're gone? Who's going to hold them to making sure that they maintain those practices?
Yep.
Please don't answer that for your job's sake, but I'm.
Right. Well, one of the things I think Tamika asked was what happens afterwards. And I think that's when our YMCAs and our local groups come into play. We have so many organizations that are out there. Like you talked about the church hurt type thing. I think those are the groups that have to step it up. We have 1 million churches in any one of our cities. And I think that's where they have to step it up. The YMCAs and all of these other organizations, or our minority health coalitions, or our urban leagues, any of those organizations have to step up their game when it comes to education. They don't have a choice because teachers cannot do it all. And like you said, in 2 years, most of this money is gone. So who's going to make it keep going? It has to be some money from somewhere. And these organizations have balls, they have events where they probably should talk a little bit more about how education is going to be the tool to help some of our students.
All right. I'm going to stop y'all because I said, let me sit back and just watch how this. And if I could take notes on everything I just heard in the last 24 minutes, see what I did there? We went so many places with that. And for the viewers, may I just contextualize this for a little bit? Mr. Marshall, Ms. Holiday, they're right here in the city. Ms. Graves, Ms. Webb, you guys are both in Anderson, correct?
Right.
So we have this rural perspective in terms of what you're seeing on a daily basis. And interesting that you said what you said, Ms. Graves, by being the only person of color on staff, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And so it's just like trying to see that through your eyes every day, because at Vanguard, where we work, the whole staff is of color.
Right. That when you said that,
It threw me too. Wow. It threw me too.
Yeah, like the entire
However, and Marshall, we've thrown this back. Just because you're Black don't mean you're competent. Just because you are of color don't mean you're competent. And that's a conversation that we really essentially have to have today. And I just wanted to just frame something before we go into this next question, because it deals with systemic racism, right? And lately, everything is just happening so fast that it gets coined before anybody even actually gets a chance to learn what it actually means. And then, yeah, we're hearing the word around equity, but you're not connecting the dots anywhere. You're just hearing the word in trainings. In one of my classes, I have a 7th grade group. And I'm going to be honest with you, this particular group, when I first met this bunch, I did not like them. But it wasn't necessarily about like. One of the things that I had noticed is a lot of things of what we tend to say on terms of who should be teaching. And then we get into assumptions that somebody is at home and that the kids are coming from a perfect, ideal American dream like home. And we got to get that notion on out of here, first of all. And because automatically, and you guys hear it all the time, but what are the parents doing? And when you see these numbers about who's suffering from alcoholism, who's suffering from drugs, who's suffering from homelessness, who's suffering from domestic violence, where do you think those numbers are actually going to fall? Just random people? No, these are people with the children.
Mhm.
So if I'm in a broken systemic situation, then I'm just trying to survive with what I have. Now, this 7th grade group that I just mentioned, we've grown on each other. Yeah, we just learned we started to work on ultimate frisbee in class, but I'm the first person to teach them baseball. I'm the first person to taught them kickball in the 7th grade. So again, I'm already drawing parallels in terms of what they did not get, what they didn't get. But we watched a film called Chicago at the Crossroad. And ultimately, this film is circled around the apartments up in Chicago, the Robert Taylor homes, Ari Green homes, all those apartments, and the impact of why systemic housing, public housing, the impact and how Chicago was a catalyst for a program that essentially carried throughout the United States. Public housing, public education. We're starting to see a connection here because just like me, my students' mind, they were blown when they found out that there was an actual law that says that if a mother wanted to be on welfare, I'm not old enough to remember, I wasn't around then when that if there was a father in the home, he either had to move out or die. Those were his 2 options. Because right now, and you guys know that I'm right, so many people have said, well, where are the fathers? Go ahead and look in the law, it's right there. And so again, when we begin to contextualize where these problems actually stem from, then it doesn't kind of seem all over the place because it's all rooted. With systemic racism, I've always been a opponent. You got to talk about the roots before you talk about the leaves. I said, because the leaves fall all over the place, but the roots are made from seeds. So I'm trying to rhyme, but essentially, I brought that up because when we're talking about what are you trying to do through education, and the beautiful thing about our school is having autonomy to actually have the conversation with 13-year-olds about what systemic racism is beyond saying the N-word or saying something derogatory. No, I'm talking to them right now about what does this actually look like. And prior to this conversation, we were having a conversation about COINTELPRO and just giving them some context. We're going to have to spoon feed them differently? Absolutely. But you guys also have to remember that we're dealing with a generation that got bombarded by a whole different form of how we communicate through social media. Starting about 2008, 2010, it did like this. Quadrupled and quadrupled and quadrupled. That's the only way in which they're communicating. So to your point, Ms. Webb, a lot of people do have to step up, but a lot of people also have to be competent to what they don't see. And because I'm sensing, look, my Jedi force is sensing a lot of frustration on this panel. And not a lot of places to vent to. So I'm so glad you guys came here to vent to us, because now I'm going to throw this question out at you. What are some of the ways in which education can actually help fight systemic racism? And what are you doing? And this is for you guys on the chat as well.
I think it depends on what kind of education you're getting. You know, if they're miseducated, like so many things of us, right? They're going to.
Hey, Miss Holiday, I don't know if it's me, but you're going in and out. I think because you're moving your phone. We kind of got bits and pieces of it.
It could be this area too, because when a plane goes over, I have trouble. This is a real old building. Is that better?
Yep,
Yes,
that's better. We hear you.
I think that question, it depends on if they're getting the right education. For so many generations, we've been getting misinformed. If the education is based on truth, yeah, I think that education can make an impact on racism. But if we're not learning the truth in the first place, how is the education effective? And it's evident now in our society and our communities that it's not. It's lacking truth. It's lacking awareness.
I think the systemic part comes from keeping people where they think they belong. A lot of times we don't go out of our way to explain to parents, families, whoever, that you don't have to stay stuck. Nobody can determine where you go. And I think a lot of our way back believe, okay, I moved in this apartment. When I get grown, I'm gonna move in the apartment next door to my mom. When I get grown, my kid's gonna move there. That's the systemic part that you're talking about. When you talk about the whole Chicago thing, or in Anderson, when we grew up, there were maybe 2 low-income apartment complexes my whole life. And now we have maybe 10, because like you said, that's a setup. It's a setup from coming from where you live to where you go to school to where you work or don't work. That's all the process of keeping you where somebody thinks you belong. And until we teach everybody to break out of that cycle, it will not change. I mean, I get tired of saying it, but of course I was a teen parent and my parents had jobs. And so the thing you're talking about where they say, oh, she can't be on Medicaid or she can't do this, your stepfather can't pay for the baby to be born because she's this, or somebody need to get on welfare. That's a true thing. When people say, you need to apply for this process, but your father can't live in the house, or you can't get this. And you guys don't know my mother, but my mother was the type of person she's like, well, we just have to pay this bill because you don't need to know my business. So there are people that don't understand. Everybody doesn't need to know what's going on for you. And until we start teaching our families that nobody can control where you are. And we live in a very small town. And some people believe that once you're here, you're stuck, or once you're there, you're stuck. And I hear people say, I can't wait to get out of here. I can't wait to leave this town. I don't care where you are. People say it all the time, but until you change your mindset, nothing's going to change no matter where you move. And that's the systemic part that's already ingrained in families for years and years and years. Like Mrs. Holloway said, unless you know who you are, you will never get that. You will never understand that there is more to you than an apartment complex or a check or that same job that your cousin might have had. I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with that, because I did the Burger King, I did the nursing homes, I did all those. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but unless you realize that there's more to life than what somebody else told you you had to do, it will not change.
So Ms. Webb, what you just did, and I want to go ahead and I'm gonna put your name next to it. All right, let's go ahead and put this on paper. What you really just did is said that education don't need to stop at 18.
No.
And education beyond that does not mean that you need to go to college. To always say, I'm saying you should go to college, but if you do not go to college, if you do not go to college, you said, and I think you said it this masterfully, people are putting you where you think you should be. When are you going to actually create a form or structure? How do we, or to where?
Well, always think that it starts with our parents. I think a lot of times we leave them out. We say it happens at school, but all that education does not happen in those 6 hours that we have them. I mean, you guys have, go ahead.
Now I'm having back and forth with you.
Okay, what you say?
I'm Roland Martin right now. What starts with the parents?
I think making them understand that the school is theirs too. These people do not control your children whatsoever. I think the relationship between your child, like Mrs. Holiday said, when your children come home, ask them about it. They might not be able to verbalize what the teacher did to them or did to another student in a way that they understand that it's racism, or that they were picking on this child because they look like me, or their hair wasn't the way somebody thought. I mean, I've had this conversation at my job about my hair, and I'm thinking, well, it grew out of my head. So what do you mean how I wear my hair to work? Because people don't understand that this is my real hair and this is how it grew. Just because you got up this morning, took a shower, dried it, and came to work doesn't make my hair any different than yours. So I think that conversation needs to start with our parents. Like back when I never had a Black teacher before, I think I told people that. And so I had one in first grade. I didn't have another one until junior high. And that's a little weird that you never see any other Black people. When I walked in my building, I was the person in charge. There was a custodian. That's it. And the first thing the kids said, well, how did you get this job? You know, they want to know, why am I there? I'm like, I went through a lot to get here, but I'm here. And I started talking to parents that come in, greeting our parents with just a regular greeting. I don't care if they're late 42 times. That's not your business that she don't have a job. You know, and you need to talk to that parent or talk to those people and say, well, I'm just glad your child showed up, and talk about something else. Quit dogging people so bad that they don't even want to be a part of the education. They don't even care that their kids are on a Chromebook or on a cell phone or on a tablet, not interacting with anybody other than those people that they see for 6 hours. Having a regular conversation with our parents outside of the 6 hours changes the lives of everybody.
Mm-hmm. I just need to exhale for a moment.
Sorry.
Because that was a whole, how you hitting it from any direction, but we are on that topic of systemic racism, and I wanted to pass the ball to Charlotte and Robert. Can you guys please give your input as well? I want to make sure everybody taps into that topic.
Charlotte, you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, well, not only does it give, like, if we're teaching, depending on what we're teaching, if we're teaching the right thing, it not only gives that child knowledge of who they are, their heritage, what they can do, that they can be anything, but it also, if we do that with the teachers, and not only include the teachers, but include the families, like Ms. Webb was saying, then everybody's included. And if it just becomes, what my goal is at the end of the day, is that the culture that I'm trying to instill in the building is just going to become the culture. So it just doesn't look any different. You know, all the teachers talk this way. All the teachers treat all the kids, regardless of, you know, where they come from, what kind of grades they get, how, you know, whatever it is, that they're treating everybody the same in terms of an even playing field. But then knowing also too, that the ones, you might not be able to start everybody on an even playing field, because somebody came to school today despite not having any water, and despite not having any heat, and despite not having lights, but they still got to school. Whereas somebody else had a really great breakfast and drove and watched their mom's, you know, TV in their car on their way through the parent pickup line. So you can't start everybody on an even playing field. And I think that my school has done, I feel like, a really, really good job, because they've been kind of forced to, with the number of migrants that they've had, that they are really doing a really great job with trying to understand that not everybody is, you know, Caucasian, and not everybody is coming from a 2-parent household, whether they're Black, they're white, they're Burmese, it doesn't matter. Take everybody's situation and take that into account, and don't be mad at that kid because they were 15 minutes late today, when they're thinking, golly, you know, I had to get my sister up today. I had to catch the bus to get here. And, you know, you're mad at me because I don't, you know, have my books right, and I don't have my pencil out, and I'm just, you know, I haven't even eaten. So just understanding that not everybody is going to be starting from that playing field that we wish every child was going to start at.
Well, Ms. Charlotte, you mentioned Burmese, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm trying to Google everything, but I know I got some viewers out here like, well, probably doing the same thing. From your perspective, how well are they adjusting and adapting to that rural environment? Looking around and, seeing that, hey, we stand out. I've been a student where I looked around and I've had my hair patted before,
Mhm.
and so how's this experience been for them that
So
adapting?
they are actually not, they're almost not the minority. The
Mhm.
Burmese population is almost not the minority. It's very close between the Caucasian population and the Burmese population, and then the African American population. We're the very lowest. So I would say they're acclimating quite well. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of support in the building. Individuals that can translate, and then there's English language classes that they're taking. So they're acclimating quite well
Thank
in a
you.
very short amount of time. I would imagine probably the last 5 years, which is, I'm very glad for that population. I'm glad that they are assimilating and that everybody is, making it easy for them. I want that population to be supported. However, I need that same effort and that same quickness and that same efficiency and promptness all over, no matter where they're coming from, whether they're, a Burmese student, a white student, a Black student, but especially that student that's living in that city. They're living in the city of Indianapolis. So I'd like to see that same effort across the city, for the effort that's been put in for that population.
And she said what she said. Mr. Marshall?
When you started setting up your question, the first thing that came to my mind was somebody gonna say, "Ooh, they teaching CRT over at Vanguard." I'm so tired of hearing that phrase. Listen, my life experience is a full lesson in CRT. Listen, to answer your original question, E, there needs to be a policy focus on implicit bias training, cultural competency, as opposed to this fight centered around CRT. In addition to that, there needs to be more pathways for individuals like Ms. Webb and more folks like myself to have leadership positions in education and to be able to employ more folks that look like us. And I think there needs to be a serious, systematic effort to recruit more Black and brown folks into education. Check this out, Eric. In the late 60s, there was a lot of legislation changes, right? That we all know about, right? Two things that happened in that space was one, there were discrimination barriers that were removed that were preventing married women from becoming educators, and there were discrimination barriers removed for Black people becoming educators. In the 1970s, the average salary for teachers was equivalent to what is about $67,000 a year today. In 2021, the average salary for a teacher across the nation was about $49,000.
Mhm.
The more of us, people that look like the folks on this panel, that got into education, the lower the dollars and the pay got. So what does that do to the number of us that are in it? Eric, you went to Attucks, and you remember the history of Attucks and how those teachers had master's degrees, PhDs. They were the best educated Black folks across the country were coming in to teach at Attucks, and they were paid well to be able to do that. I don't think there is a big enough push and there's definitely not a systematic push for more of us in these spaces to be able to push those outputs that we've been talking about all day for our kids.
All right. Anybody else like to touch on that?
Well, yeah, I do believe that the educators are not getting their due, not just monetarily, and but also just work that they do and impacting our children. It's phenomenal. Personality problem. The different children are trying to compile.
Sorry, Miss Holiday, you're going in and out again.
Oh, let's see. Sorry.
I'll jump in for a second though. I mean, I think I agree with what you were saying as far as it's disheartening hearing those numbers. And especially, I mean, obviously, like I'm not in the educational system per se, but through the things that I do within the tea shop and through the programs that we run through our foundation, we get a lot of these kids that, especially around Tease Me, being in the Tarkenton area, we've been there for a year, April 1st. And, it's been really interesting is one word, but then also like I'm learning a lot because I'm seeing a lot of these kids. I mean, there's 4 neighborhoods that feed into Tarkenton. You got $30,000 homes all the way up to $1 million home. And they are like, we are the melting pot. So when you're there and you're exposed to some of these kids and you're listening to, certain kids talk this way, certain kids talk that way, you can tell there's a huge disparity on the haves and the have-nots. It's definitely there. And, one of the things for me is like, I'm passionate about youth, not in the space of being a teacher or being in the educational world, but in a sense of how can I use the platform that I have to educate the kid where we can get them. So I heard, even, Charlotte, you talked a little bit about, or maybe it was Miss Webb, you talked about the kid coming and coming late and not getting on them for being late. One of the things that I worry about is if you don't teach them about being on time, if you don't teach them about the thing that could happen when you graduate, let's talk about they're not equipped for the real world. So when you get to the real world and you have a job, you have to be on time. There are certain that's the things that you can control, like the things you can control. Obviously, mom, car breaks down, you got to get there's certain things that you can't control, but the things that you can control. I wanted to do a program at a certain time in the morning because it's important to me to have the right people that have time to come into the space to do the program. But one of the people that I talked to said, oh, that's too early for the kids. They're not going to come. And so for me, it's like, well, you didn't even give them the opportunity
Right.
to make their own choice. The doors will lock. If I start the program at 8:30 in the morning, the doors will lock at 8:30 because I think it's important. If it's something that you want to know and you're going to get free breakfast and you'll make a point to get there on time. But people, I also feel like there's people that make excuses for the kids and don't hold them accountable. So then it becomes a way of life. And they get upset when the next person tries to put their foot down because all the people along the way are like, oh, it's okay, and you keep letting it slide. And, unfortunately, then by the time they do learn, it's too late.
Learning responsibility and earning respect. That's powerful. Mother Majiza, you actually were working on some artwork for tonight, correct? Could we see that?
Can we see it?
Okay, let me bring it in here because it seems that I'm breaking up every time I go in there.
Well, you do that. And I was we are actually, we're about 20 deep on this Facebook chat. And I just wanted to read some of the things that you guys were saying on Facebook, because I know that you guys could have been just chilling and watching Netflix, but you're chilling with us. I know several of you guys got some wine in your hand talking about, they saying it right. They saying it right. So I wanted to at least start Nataki Pettigrew, who is a good friend of ours, serving out in Fishers, Indiana. Let me see what you say. I always believe set the expectations and kids will meet it. And not only does she believe that, she was one of our founding teachers and then did that. And to the point where the kids, you're talking about changing, solving racism education. she did it. A lot of our scholars went to high school with the confidence, and some of them actually tested out some of the classes that they had. So I definitely thank you for implementing that to those scholars. Ms. Jones said it's amazing how having and not having is going to directly affect future employment success and quality of life. Great point. Definitely appreciate the work that you're doing with educating the community about equity. You've been doing it for a while. And she agreed with you too, Mr. Marshall, in terms of implicit bias and other subtle forms of bias in education to protect the mental health of our children. And Ms. Dansby in Anderson, Indiana, 47% of K-12 students are of color and 10% of teachers are of color. So as you can see, this chat is right here alongside in this conversation. And then here comes Ms. McIntyre, who is one of our founding teachers at Vanguard. And she had this comment to say. In regards to the original question about education, fighting racism, on a teacher level, school level, we have to teach our students the skill of critical thinking and questioning. As already stated, we have to teach our students their true history. We have to hold all students to high academic expectation, especially since they are our future. On a broader level, we have to continue dismantling some of the Eurocentric policies and overall structure of how we think about school. I think COVID showed us that the traditional way of looking at education is outdated. U.S. education traditional school is arguably the central institution that perpetuates systemic racism than any other institution in the United States. It's time for transformation in education. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eric Saunders, and I'm the Green Eye. I'm joined by Tamika Catchings. Thank you, panel, for coming. Thank you, Ms. McIntyre, for pretty much shutting the show down. Leave now. You can drink your wine freely. Oh my God, what a response. And from somebody who was truly, truly on the front line. Mother Majisa, what you got for us?
Okay, here we go. I don't know how to flip this. I'm just going to turn the phone.
Best.
Okay. This piece is called Intersectional Connecting the Dots. And what this is colored tissue paper that I've torn and put together. In each place where the colors are crossing, I'm putting a dot. And then to emphasize the intersectional. And this is our faces facing both ways. And this lace that's over that represents growth. And I chose bright colors because to emphasize hope in change. So this is the piece that I came up with to do today.
Today.
And that
Started at
started
11.
at 11 a.m.
Look,
Yeah.
you made me put my artist hat on. Very eccentric, eclectic, very thoughtful, and yet informational. Very
Thank you. I hope so. I enjoyed making it, and it was quite a challenge because those questions were thought-provoking, and my mind was all over the place. I had to calm myself down because I couldn't answer all the questions in one painting, but I was going to try to sum up something. So this was a challenge for me, and I really appreciate it. You challenged me as an artist.
well. Thank you for accepting the challenge. Per always, guys. Again, since we're talking about it, and we got quite a bit of viewers on here, and you guys can chime in as well. Are we all familiar with House Bill 1134?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Marshall already brought it up.
Got you. Okay. All right. Could you get? Can we? I look now. I'm. See, that's why we got a DBD program. But would we like to? I know somebody else said yes. Would you like to go deeper in just kind of discussing what how do you see what kind of impact that's making in the community?
I think first it'd be great to hear somebody, what is what is your, not the book definition, but what is your definition of what that bill stands for or what it means?
It's what they doing in Anderson.
I heard an educator say that he felt like it was removing all the amazing things in America and just talking about the sad stuff.
Somebody said that?
Mhm.
An educator.
Yes. And then I
But
had another
Black history being sad stuff?
just the whole slavery thing. Is that all we ever gonna talk about?
Is it the sad stuff or the stuff that makes you realize this system doesn't have any integrity stuff?
That's what I would agree with that part. But I also had another educator counter and say that he felt like he doesn't understand that everybody has a perspective. If it's told from different perspectives, then you kind of get the feel of the whole story instead of saying, oh my gosh, they're going to remove my Robert E. Lee statue and I don't know what's going to happen to my life. Just think about everything that goes with Robert E. Lee other than that statue.
It's amazing. I that kind of response, because I've heard it towards other things. It just confirms how no one in this country, no citizen in this country comes away unscathed. You will be impacted and affected by the societal norms in this country, and the norms or what is accepted as the norm. What permeates every aspect of this society is racism. And Caucasians did not escape it either. They didn't run clear. They have been affected, and comments like that confirms it. When they,
well, I think if you confirm it, then you have to admit that there's a problem. You don't want to say that it's so horrible. I got to take my kid out of this school because they're going to talk about slavery. And I think people don't understand critical race theory is not just about us. It's not just about what happened to Black people as slaves. It's about the whole process of a country doing a bunch of horrible things to whoever. Now, when you talk about race, you don't just have to talk about us. But I mean, we see it because it's our perspective. I think a Caucasian person, as you just said, wouldn't see it that way because it didn't happen to them. So why do we need to talk about it? If you confront anything for what it is, it upsets people. To say that, I mean, like I keep telling you, like you said, we live in a rural area. So we were always integrated for the most part. I mean, I went to the school that was integrated when I went to 7th grade. There were 2 buses for all of us. We rode on 2 buses to a junior high school and a high school, 7th to 12th, because that's when the schools decided to be a part of the city schools as opposed to the county. So we were automatically those kids who came from that neighborhood. Now, mind you, most of our parents worked at decent places, had good jobs, but it didn't matter. We were still those kids that came on those buses. Because I went to Eastside and Highland. Most of the people that I went to school with at elementary, they stayed in their neighborhood schools. They went to Southside, Anderson, or Madison Heights. Not me. I was on a bus with about 60 kids to go to. They dropped us off, then they dropped off the high schoolers. And we were the kids that kind of integrated their schools and just messed it all up. So, and I've only been out of high school for 37 years, I think. So
I wonder why sometimes we expect them to think any other way but what or how they think. They, just like we were miseducated, they were miseducated. They have been convinced that they are superior, more intelligent, that there are certain ways that things should be, especially because it benefits them, because they are the ones that are deserving. And they think that they are deserving because in the books, we are left out, our contributions, not just to this country, but to the world. They wouldn't have a culture without us in this country. If though that's my personal opinion, but that's the way they've been taught to think. So I don't expect a certain realization. Yes, we need this critical theory, race theory. We need these other ways. It's going to take a lot of unlearning for them to have a capacity to even imagine walking in our shoes because they haven't had the experience. They don't know, and so I that's why I think the focus has got to be on us, our children, so we can help them find the tools to navigate through this. It's no different from a coach making sure their team, her team or his team have the strategies necessary to understand their components so that they can navigate and win. It's the same thing.
That bill, in my opinion, protects white supremacy. It protects white privilege, protects white fragility. I saw Nataki put in the chat that children deserve educators who teach the truth. Sometimes the truth is difficult. And as Ms. Webb said, when you are confronted with the facts, that ushers in an obligation to do something about it. And it also ushers in a level of accountability. And if you've never been held accountable before, that first piece of accountability, it hurts. And we as a country are not willing to face and deal with that hurt. And I think part of it is this is going to be a process and not a moment. And we keep doing these swift things thinking it's going to be a moment, right? I mean, and I'm not comparing the two, I'm just directly, but I'm saying like, look at our nation's and our society's attitude towards pedophilia, right? And the shift in how long it was accepted and how long it took it to, and we're still not there, right? So what's her name? Giselle just got convicted earlier this year and none of her clients have been arrested, right? Here we are now. So we're still not there on that. And we're just now having this huge societal shift on our attitude on that. And so this is going to be a really long haul type situation. And so it's imperative for educators like us and the educators behind us to keep fighting this fight because this is not a problem that's going anywhere anytime soon.
And I think it goes back to the training too. I mean, we can't.
It goes back to
the training of teachers. Like when you talked about the cultural competency piece, they think if I learn some lingo, if I learn about some videos, I watch a couple TikToks, that's not going to educate you on how to deal with us. It's not going to do it. And the part about the parents, I think a lot of our parents don't even know who they are. Like she said, if you don't know who you are, you're definitely not going to be able to go to the school and say, I don't appreciate the way you address my child. You won't come up there like you had no business saying whatever. If you're not understanding, the kids are not going to get it. And I don't know, if we go back to, like he talked about the 60s or the 70s, when you had schools that were all brown or all black, those people came out and said, I'm going to college, I'm getting me a degree, because it was instilled in them, especially in the South, that you are a part of what needs to happen. So we have to change here and say, you are a part of this process. Don't allow that to happen. And a lot of times our parents will get on Facebook and complain about what happened to their child, but they don't confront it because of what you said, their school hurt. They won't go to that school and say, I can't believe they did that to my child, unless they come up there ready to fight. Don't be ready to fight. Come in there with an attitude that I do not appreciate what happened with my students. Because that person, like you said, they need to be held accountable. But we don't hold them accountable. We hold them hostage, like with our attitude. And the first thing, I knew she was gonna come up here mad. No, I don't appreciate the way you treated my child. And why did you do that? Make them accountable for their behavior. Make teachers accountable for how they treat your students. And then you as the parent have to tell your child, this is not acceptable. You didn't come to school for that. You came to school to learn. And the first thing people say, they don't teach our kids about this. They don't teach them about that. Some of that's at home.
Mhm.
Some of that's at home.
It's interesting that you say that. So you come to school to learn. Then what are you supposed to be doing at home?
Learning.
Right. it's interesting because, like I said, so if it's not emphasized that, to learn, because doing what I say and not what I do, that don't make any sense, because visual learner, don't cap my look, and don't cap. Don't don't cap, sucker. But don't oh good. I'm glad we're able to laugh about this. But if the kids don't have a structure for learning, because something that comes up in a lot of our meetings when we hit meetings, that we, this term latchkey kids, you got kids coming home, parents not home, parents got to work. So again, what's the influence? That's why I brought up the communication, and if you guys know, communication and how things communicated, especially in America, is dangerous. And I mean, we can go back 100 years ago with one of the very first films, A Birth of a Nation, right? And essentially what that film did was it got every white man all here in the Midwest fired up, and next thing you know, you got the Ku Klux Klan. And I bring this up because that came at such a time where we was essentially doing this. And next thing you know, we got to fight for anti-lynching.
Yeah.
Because to kill Black people in the South is now a sport. But the crazy thing about that is if that does not happen, as you guys know, then there's no migration to the North. There's no Harlem the way we know it. There's no New York the way we know it. There's no Chicago the way we know it. There's no Indianapolis the way that we know it. So essentially, we're all here in our cities and our subcities. No slight to Anderson, but that's what it is. But who knows? We have cities that have been here in Indiana that already have died off. You have cities that have been murdered off.
Oh, you brought that up?
And we're not just talking about Black Wall Street. That's just the one that we heard about. Black Wall Street, those are just the ones that we heard about. Okay. And so again, fast forward, that all started with just how that was communicated on the perspective of who we are as Black people. Again, that's why coming to this day and age, what's being communicated to the people and how is it being communicated to the masses? How is it being communicated ultimately to the youth? Which brings me to this question, because most of us, all of us essentially are in education or working with youth in some kind of way. How then are we having this conversation in a very productive manner with our youth on ending racism and what that means for them? Because Dr. Martin Luther King told me I had a dream, and Malcolm X told me by any means necessary, and I still believe that. So how do we talk to our students to fire them up about what's going on?
I think it starts with integrity, teaching a child what it means to have integrity. And no matter who is watching you, you have to live with you at the end of the day. So if you believe in yourself, if you know that you're living your best life and you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, and you're being, the human being that you're supposed to be, and the Black child and the Black young adult that you're supposed to be, regardless of what the people around you say, then nobody can take that away from you. If you know it and you believe it, it's intrinsic. Nobody can take it away. Nobody can change it. So I think that is the conversation, teaching a child what integrity means, even before they can ever even say the word, teaching them what it means. And hopefully, if you're teaching that at a young age, they're going to grow up and that's just going to be their way of life. But I think if we're not teaching them that it doesn't matter if nobody sees that you stole that piece of gum or whatever, you stole it, that wasn't right. So knowing for themselves what's wrong and right, and believing that, and not letting anybody take that away from them, I think is where the conversation has to start.
Thank you.
And to that, I think you're thinking about morals, which is very lacking in our communities now. I'd like to tell a story. I'm not directly involved with children anymore, but I had two programs. I used to teach dance, so I had two dance troupes, and I used to teach through an artist program going to different communities. And My students were bused to Lawrence then. This is in the early 90s. And uh, and the dance troupe was volunteer. They could come in. They learned African dance with the idea that they would be able to learn how to choreograph and perform. Well, the students would come in with an attitude, and I can figure out, well, okay, you don't have to be here. I'm not getting paid. This is for free. You coming in, and what's with the attitude? So what I did was put the children in a circle. We sat on the floor. I would ask them, no, before they came in, it was like, leave the attitude outside the door. Come in, make a circle, sit down. I want you to speak to the person to you. I want you to say something to that person next to you that has nothing to do with their hair or their tennis shoes or what they have on. And then after that, it was, what was your day like? I had no idea of the racism that these children were enduring, and that their parents were telling them to ignore it. Just ignore it. You need to go to school to learn. 5 hours a day, you're being spiritually, intellectually insulted, and you're supposed to ignore it. So one of the students, who was very chocolate skinned, told me that he was being teased, called all kind of names, derogatory names, including nigger, and by one teacher. And when he would tell his parents, they weren't doing anything. Well, that's when I began to teach about melanin, why our hair grows the way it does, our features, all that, African contributions. And I am telling you from experience, I saw a difference in how those children started treating other children, how they started treating each other. I saw that boy's chest stick out and his head go up, understanding why he looked the way he looked and appreciating it. And it made a difference in how they danced, how they performed. They could get on stage. I didn't even have to be there for a performance. They could speak at a mic and conduct themselves just so maturely and professionally. So knowing who you are and why you are, and feeling good, when you value yourself, makes it you're less apt to hurt someone who looks like you. You're less apt to hurt them. When you walk into situations, it's with a pride, because you know who you are. No one, that racist tension that we all have witnessed and have walked into, that's not going to bring you down, because you're equipped with who you are, and you know who they are. So that makes a difference, in addition to what the young lady said about morals. Morals, integrity, self-knowledge, culture. And I'd like to hear everybody to add to that.
I think one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to create spaces where educators like Eric can do some of the things that you're talking about. And so, it is built into our school to be able to celebrate and explore who we are in our culture. One of the things that we do on a weekly basis, we have a community circle on Fridays. And so, the basis of it was originally to do a celebration. We're recognizing kids for their academic and behavioral success of the week. But one of the things that we added to it, every week, we bring in a minority professional to talk about their education and career pathway, so that our kids can see themselves in these future careers and explore these things that maybe they had no other exposure to. And they can begin to build plans based upon the experiences that they're learning from. The other thing that I really love, and Eric kind of touched on it a little bit, I'm actually going to flip this hosting thing back on him in a second, but we have tribes. And in tribes, from education lens, it's the social emotional learning class. But that's where we take a deeper dive into who we are and where we come from, and begin to be able to build some of that pride that you talked about, Ms. Holiday. And it's everything. I mean, we're nimble. And so, we had a young lady who was fair skinned, who kept calling her peers a monkey, and she had to be educated on the history of that word. where did this come from? Where did you pick this up from? And this is why we don't say it. And so Eric led a tribe session that week about colorism. And so when I said I was about to flip it on you, Eric, you want to talk a little bit about and share a little bit about like some of the things that you deal with in the tribes with our kids?
Absolutely. So I work with, we have grades 5 through 8, and we have the opportunity to just take a deep dive into our culture and like a culture as a people, but then it's also as a culture of self. And it really is just a great opportunity to hear them think critically about things and really hear their voice. And so we kind of, of course, there's a filter, but we want them to, feel like they can be, transparent and who they are and what they believe. And I've heard some very, very dynamic responses. For example, yesterday, we had some seventh graders decode the poem by Saul Williams, Amethyst Rocks. And at the end of it, it goes, public enemy number one, we are public enemy number 1, referring to. And one of the students took that and said, so Martin Luther King was public enemy number 1 because he knew how to mobilize the people. And my mind was just blown. And I said, and it's interesting, I said, and then they was able to connect the dots. It's like Martin Luther King died by, gunshot, mobilized the people. Malcolm X died by gunshot, mobilized the people. Tupac died by gunshot, mobilized the people. Biggie died by gunshot, mobilized people. And so, but they connect, they say they just want shot because in their generation, Nipsey, died by gunshot, mobilized the people, and then we as adults might not know who was Lil Durk, but to the kids, he means something to them. Gunshot wound, mobilize the people. And so, and so again, this opportunity for us to just go in depth, learn a little bit about emotions. Why are we angry? Why are we sad? But then just kind of learning to develop a perspective about yourself and society. That's it, Mr. Marshall.
I was going to say
Right.
two more things on the subject that we do, and I think we do really effectively. And Mrs. Pettigrew, who's in the chat, and she was really a pioneer in helping us get this going. But we use a curriculum that's used across the country, Engage New York for ELA. We removed all of the, I shouldn't say all, most of the text, the novels that are in the curriculum, and replaced them with culturally relevant novels. Our 8th graders right now are reading autobiography of Malcolm X. We read Baldwin. We're all over the place. We Langston Hughes, there's Black authors through and through the entire school. There are Latino authors through and through the entire school because they need to be able to see themselves reflected in the content, I think, to really connect and engage with the content. And the last piece is I feel like we do a really good job of fostering a school culture, as I mentioned earlier, where everybody can be comfortable being in their own skin. We do what we call with the staff, we call it every week, we do what we call a gratitude circle. And so we stand around, you don't go directly around robbing, people can speak freely when they want to. And everybody says, I am grateful for, that's the sentence starter. And we share out. And we had a really emotional one at the beginning of the school year where we had a teacher who said, I am grateful for working in a place where I can be me, Black, in my own skin, where I don't work into the workplace and nobody questions why I have an afro today, I have plaits tomorrow. Nobody's asking to touch my hair, and who I am and what I am in my culture is normal. And when we were in the midst of a strategic plan right now, and one of the components was interviewing and surveying the students, and that was the common theme. They like being here because they can be themselves. They don't have to code switch. They don't have to assimilate. They can be their authentic selves. And so when you're your authentic self, then you're more prone to bring your best self to school. And so that's something that's what I really love about my job. And I think it's something that other schools can replicate. We're not hoarding this. It's something that I think they need to replicate. I think it's a necessity. And I think it could go a long way to improving education, particularly in urban communities.
That's fabulous.
We are now in our last 5 minutes. And like I said, it's a hard stop at 8:30. That's just how we are. Because, look, we're going to do that. Black folks are always trying to stay after the party's over, man. Ain't nothing else to y'all can leave. But what we tend to do, first of all, thank you, Mother Majisa, for your work, your artwork, and sharing that with us, and your treasure. In this last 5 minutes, we just want to go around just so you can share your last remarks. Try to cap it to about 30 seconds. So that way we can get everybody to where they need to be after this in a timely manner. Amen. All right.
All minds are clear.
We'll talk about the collection plate later. Ms. Graves, would you like to leave your last remarks?
I'm just really, really happy to be part of this conversation. And I think this is a definite conversation that needs to continue to happen. We can't just let it go from here, because there's so many things that we just touched on but couldn't elaborate on. And there's so many things that we didn't even touch on that are so relevant to the conversation. So like I said, I'm just really happy to be part of this conversation, and I hope not to be the last.
All right. Ms. Webb?
Well, I think I just agree with her. I'm happy to be here. And I also think the conversation is important. You have to have them. Parents, students, fellow teachers. I know somebody asked, should we be bold enough to say something to our colleagues? And I think we should. There's no reason you can't state your opinion when somebody else has an opinion that's in a book and it's being taught to everybody. This is my opinion. I think you need to back off, or you need to talk about something other than Pinocchio. We have to move on. We have to have conversations that are tough, and we have to confront it. It's your turn, Marshall.
My apologies, I was on mute. As it relates to this conversation around education and systematic racism, I'm reminded of a quote that says, those that desire to control as opposed to lead will always find critical, independent, and/or creative thinkers problematic. I wanted to use that quote to encourage all those Black educators that are out there, principals, school leaders, charter founders. Shout out to folks over at Believe, Rooted, Thrival, that are doing the Lord's work. Stay encouraged, keep fighting the fight, keep blazing a path, because there needs to be more of us, and most importantly, our kids deserve and need us.
Mhm.
Okay, I guess it's my turn yet. Opinion.
Last but not least.
First, I want to thank you, Tamika, for creating this opportunity so that we can hear each other's voices and learn from each other. And I wanted to say thank you to Eric and all the other panelists for sharing your truths. I learned a lot today, and I'm so thankful to have had this opportunity to be here sharing. And I hope that I can come back, and I hope that this conversation on that title will be brought up again, because it's so vital. That's all. Thanks.
Mick, I don't know about you, but it sounds like we got to have this a part two, but this time like a conference with actionable items. Well, because normally that's how we end the conversation in terms of what actionable items we can do from here. But how do you think things went?
I think so. I think so. One of the thing that I thought about the most is, there's a young lady that I come into contact with at Tarkington, and I've been watching her. And as we started thinking about like what conversation do we have with young people, the education and what they get in school, you know, one of my questions are going to be, okay, so we talked a lot about changing some of the text, but at what point did that actually happen? And I think, Mr. Marshall, you kind of touched on that, just changing the program and changing how you do things. You just have you've used the textbook, but then you've also created your own textbook from the textbook. And, like when, at what point? So my question moving on, I mean, it's 8:30, so down the road when we come back is going to be centered around like, at what point did that happen? But I think today was really good. We appreciate all of you guys coming on and spending some time with us, spending a Friday evening with us. And Eric, thank you for letting me be your co-host. I always love being alongside of you. We got a couple of hours till we celebrate Eric 1 year close to the 40. That's what we're gonna say.
Yep. I'm about to be 35 years old.
1 year close to the 40.
Join us next month, guys. For our next conversation, we are going to be on the second Friday next month. A whole new panel. Spread the word if you enjoyed this conversation. Come back. We definitely need to keep this going. But this conversation here, again, it definitely can't stop because we definitely got to get some parents and maybe some young people on this conversation a bit deeper and make sure that we all are striving to be back on the same page and be this thing that we used to be. I believe it was called a village, a tribe, at the very least a community. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's our time. I'm the GEB, the Green Eye Bandit. Checking out.
Thank y'all.